My favorite teaching for tonight is going to be covering the 7 laws of the harvest, or 7 laws concerning sowing and reaping. How did this begin for me? Well, Dr. Song Lee's son, Nathan, so just a shout out to him, but when I was in his room one time, and then as I started to leave his room, in front of his door, he had the 7 laws of sowing and reaping right in front of his door. And that made an impression upon me, and that would probably explain in his own life his spiritual walk with Jesus Christ. Another reason was now our deceased friend, our beloved Big Chuck, but I remember him quoting one of the 7 laws quite often, or several of them, many times. So then because of that, I read this booklet, or skimmed through it. I think his last name is Lawrence. It's called 7 Laws of the Harvest. I would highly recommend to read that. But I'm going to give you the easy version of this, the 7 laws of sowing and reaping. Okay, look at John chapter 4, please. Look at John chapter 4. The first thing you must understand is you reap what you did not sow. You might say, how so, Pastor? Okay, so remember what sowing and reaping is. Whatever you do in this life, sowing, you're going to gain the consequences in return. That's reaping. So that is inevitable, and even secular people realize that every action must have a consequences. There are philosophical arguments for that as well concerning cause and effect. So this is undeniable. This is a law of nature. So notice right here, when you do things, notice right here that you're going to gain things in this life that you did not even do. Really, Pastor? Yeah. You know what the simple answer to that is? The simple answer to that is look at John chapter 4. And notice what Jesus said to his disciples right here. You'll notice in verse 35, say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. So look at all this you're going to gain. And he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathereth fruit unto life eternal. That, look at this, that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together. And herein is that saying true, one soweth and another reapeth. I sent you to reap that whereon ye bestowed no labor. Other men labored, and ye are entered into their labors. A great example is the Bible believers who laid out before us to give us Bible-believing truth and doctrine. And we're reaping what we did not sow. These people, martyrs have bled and died to preserve the Word of God. And then scholars like Scofield Larkin and Dr. Ruttman sacrificed a lot in their lives to give us this teaching. You onliners have gotten this teaching online for free through great sacrifice of some of the people. So you people in this church got to realize this. You are reaping what you did not sow. So this is something where you got to treasure, not reject. Not think church is an option or a work. No, you're reaping what you did not sow. Here's another example.
Amen. That's good.
Isn't that the same true, though, for sin? Isn't that the same true for sin?
Yeah.
Why? Because what happens is that you're reaping the consequences what you did not sow. For example, your family member. And when a family member sins, it hurts you who's innocent of the sin. That's a law of nature. Any sacrifice or hurt that I may have gone through or you may have gone through in your life, you don't have to feel bad about that because somebody else may reap what you've worked hard and labored upon. If I get no fruit in my ministry, there will be fruit, I guarantee you that. Someone else is just reaping it, not me. I'm the one doing the sowing. You know why? Because the Bible says God gets the increase. Amen. But the greatest example, I got to get going, but I want to say this last one. Matthew chapter 6, I think, Matthew 6, it talks about the greatest thing. So the birds of the air, they don't sow, but they still reap. They gain the benefit. And then God says, are not even ye more precious than the birds? You know what the greatest example of that is? Jesus Christ bled and died for you, and he sowed so much where you reap.
Oh, wow.
Now that should humble you. And that should put you on the altar before I even jump to the 7th law right here. All right, that's why I love this teaching right here. You ready for this one? All right, the next one, you're going to reap. You reap in kind what you sow. You're going to reap in kind what you sow. All right, let's look at the book of Hosea, and then as well as Galatians 6, please. We're going to look at Hosea, and we're going to look at the book of Galatians chapter 6. Okay, what does that mean, Pastor? What that means is this, is that when you're sowing something bad in your life, then it is a guarantee that you're going to have to reap evil in your life. Now, you might say, well, that's a no-brainer, Pastor. No, you don't have a brain. You don't think like that. You might say, what do you mean, Pastor? Because you think that because you went to church, you did soul winning, and you helped out the pastor so much, you're not going to reap the consequences of your drinking problem that you had before, or your fornicating problem that you had before. See, you got to realize this. Just because you do a lot of good things, you sound like a Catholic. Oh, I did these many good things, so I'm going to go to heaven. No, what about these sins that you commit in your life? Yeah. That's why our salvation is found on the faith of Jesus Christ, not by our works. But now in our physical life, you got to realize this. You have to reap in the same kind. You have to reap the same in kind what you sowed. There's no way around it. So look at the book of Galatians chapter 6. And then 8 through 9 is the famous passage. But then I think as well as verse 7, what did it show? It shows, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Look at that. You can't run away from God. For whatsoever, see what you sow, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he what? Also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. See that? There's no way around it. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. So notice right here that it's not just the same for evil, it's the same thing for good as well. If you sow many good things in your life, it's a guarantee you're going to reap the same good things in return. That's what God promised to you. Now another thing is this, is that you reap in kind what you sow. And then you reap at a different time. From what you sow. God, why won't you answer my prayer now? Because it's not his timetable yet. That's why. It's not his timetable yet. So you got to understand that you're going to reap at what? At a different time from what you sow. So you're sowing in prayer, but you're not reaping it. It's because God has a different timetable for that. So what do? You just have to keep sowing. And then when you reap, boom, it's like that. But it's the same thing for evil too. That's why a lot of people think that they can get away with their sin. They think they can get away with their sin because they're sowing so much evil and God did not strike me dead yet. You know why you're so prone to skipping Bible reading and prayer, and why you're so prone to go back to the same sinful struggle? You don't reap immediately after you sowed. But you got to realize this, reaping time will come, payday will come, but it comes at a different time. You plant a church and you work hard, you don't reap anything. But God promised to you that you will reap one day. So that's why you just have to be faithful. Don't worry about it. It's just at a different timetable. That's what you got to understand. Notice that Galatians chapter 6, as we read that passage again, 6, 7, 8 we read. But then look at verse 9 through 10. It points out, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in what? Due season we shall reap, if we faint not. So notice right here that it's at a different timetable that you reap. Another thing you must understand is you reap in full harvest when faithful. In sowing. But if you sow evil, the reaping will come on its own. You might say, really? Yep. Because look at Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 through 9 again. You'll notice right here that God's saying, don't be deceived, right? See, you can't fool yourself. God's not mocked. So this is talking about a negative sowing and reaping here, not a positive. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So that's a negative thing, right? So notice right here, the negative thing, you will reap. It's going to come on its own. But look at the good part. But for he that soweth to his flesh, if you read that passage, he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. Right? That comes all on its own by the context of the previous verses. But look at the second half here. This is what people don't pay attention. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting, based on the context of what? Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in what? Due season we shall reap, based on what condition? If we faint not. So you got to realize this. If you're sowing a lot, but you're not reaping anything from God, you weren't faithful. See, if you want to earn the reward, you can't just say, well, I studied 1 year in college, so I deserve the diploma. No, it's when you're faithful all the way, when you go all the way 4 years. Then you get the diploma. But evil comes on its own. You keep smoking cigarettes, the evil consequence will come on its own. You get lung cancer, etc. How about that? Now that would preach right here. All righty then. So as much as we would like to end this lesson so that we don't get under conviction, let's look at number 5. You reap in proportion what you sow. Look at the book of 2 Corinthians, please. Look at the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Now, why is that important? You got to realize this. Whatever you sow in this life, you will reap, right? But you got to understand this. Do you want, okay, let's bring this example. Do you want a lot of people in this church, a lot of people online to reach out? Then how much are you sowing effort into it to bring in the people? If you only have like a few subscribers online or a few members in your church, then what does that result? From probably what you sowed as much or as little. But if you have a lot of people at church, or a lot of souls saved, or a lot of subscribers online, it could be because, what, you sowed a lot more. Look at that. Same thing with offering plate when you give money to the Lord. And we're not talking about quantity here, but quality. How much more you can give to the Lord, even if it's not $1 million, but if you give as much as you can give more, the more God will bless. But the more you hold back from God, the more God will hold back as well. Same thing with prayer. The more time you pray, the more God will answer. The more you hold back, God will hold back as well. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also what? Sparingly. And he which soweth bountifully shall reap also what? Bountifully. Look at that. See, if you're going to spare, then God's going to spare his blessing on you too. That should bring you under conviction right there. All right, we're going to do number 6 and number 7. The devil don't want to hear this one. You reap more than you sow. Really, Pastor? That's right. So, a great example is that you might think, oh, this sin is harmless to me, so it's not a big deal. But the Bible shows right here that no, when that sin may not be as harmless as you might think. That little sin actually brings a huge consequence. No wonder Satan wanted me to forget that one. Hosea chapter 8. Hosea chapter 8. And then Hosea chapter 10. So we're going to close it right here. Hosea 8 and Hosea 10, and then we'll call it a night. So remember this, you reap more than you sow. That's why sin is not a game. So you better be careful what you sow, my friend. You can reap more than you sow. But it's the same thing in a good way as well. You never know that the track you pass out will be beyond your wildest expectation of a soul getting saved automatically like that. So this is both a positive and a negative phrase. So you better be careful what you sow. Okay, let's look at Hosea chapter 8. We'll read verse 7. For they have sown the wind, and they shall reap the wind. Did I read that right? They shall reap the whirlwind. It hath no stalk, the bud shall yield no meal. So you think that you can keep messing around with sin? Go ahead. Hosea chapter 10. Hosea 10. You reap more than you sow. Remember that. All right. Here's something you can do. You can reap now, not before. What do I mean by that? Before, you may have messed up. You didn't know about this teaching. Perhaps this is your first time. And you're like, I messed up. So I'm sowing and reaping. I didn't get this right. Well, you can't whine about before. Why don't you start reaping now? Amen. Last year's harvest may have been bad, but we can do something about this year's harvest. Last year at summer camp, you may have not dedicated your life as much. There's something you can do this year. And that's why it's important to keep that passion and fire going. See, there's something you can do now to reap the fruit. Now, let's do it. Look at Hosea chapter 10, verse 12. Notice God tells you, sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy. Break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord. See, now do it. Why? Because before you messed up. Verse 13, ye have plowed wickedness, ye have reaped iniquity. Ye have eaten the fruit of lies, because thou didst trust in thy way in the multitude of thy mighty men. You messed up before and you know that. But now God's saying, why don't you start sowing and reaping now? This is the incredible law that is life-changing, and I hope that a lot of people will start watching this and applying it. The 7 laws of the harvest. The 7 laws of sowing and reaping. My favorite teaching for tonight.